Formula One rookies were running riot in Mexico this weekend, which had me thinking about the future of Formula One and which teams will be bringing in the next generation of Formula One champion. I am a huge proponent of Formula One academies, mainly because I don't understand how anybody can afford to get into motorsport, and they help bridge that gap for a lot of brilliant talents. I mean, George Russell, Lando Norris, Alex Albon all came through in 2019 through their respective academies, which made me curious as to what's happening in those academies right now. Who should we be keeping an eye on in the lower formulas? So I looked at each and every Formula One team's academy and picked out the most likely driver to graduate into Formula One, and then ranked them from the least exciting to the most exciting. Now, some teams had basically nobody, but stick around until the end because there are some absolute gems on their way through. Starting at the bottom of my rankings, and it has to be Haas, because Haas doesn't even have a young driver program, so I'm just throwing in Pietro Fittipaldi. Even though he doesn't technically make the cut as a rookie, I felt like Haas deserved to be in this video in some capacity. He was confirmed as their official test driver in 2019, and has made appearances for the Haas team in 2 Grand Prix, and it's those 2 Grand Prix that no longer classify him as a rookie anymore. He would race for Haas in the 2020 Sakir Grand Prix, replacing the injured Romain Grosjean, and then also finish off the season for Haas by competing at the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix also, but that was a little while ago. Since then, the closest he's been to a seat was when he was considered by Haas for the Mazepin seat when the Russian's contract was terminated at the beginning of 2022, but Kevin Magnussen was chosen over him, which I feel like is probably a good choice from the Haas team. I think the 27-year-old has probably reached his ceiling by being Haas reserve driver, hence being bottom of this list. The Williams Driver Academy doesn't have the most incredible reputation after the last few years. Logan Sargent, Dan Ticktum, Nicholas Latifi, none of which have really set the timing sheets on fire, and there aren't too many drivers that caught my eye in their current lineup. Obviously, they've got Jamie Chadwick, who destroyed W Series to the point that it no longer exists, and now is in Indy NXT. But I think the hottest prospect that they currently have is probably Zach O'Sullivan. Shortly after joining the Williams Driver Academy, Zach was named the winner of the BRDC Young Driver of the Year award, which meant last October he got his first shot in Formula One machinery, driving the Aston Martin AMR 21 at Silverstone. Then this year he came second in the Formula 2 Championship with Prema, managing 4 race wins, and then the obvious next step was Formula 2, and it's just been announced that he will represent ART in the 2024 Formula 2 season. And considering Williams have been very forthcoming at giving rookies a shot in Formula 1, we may eventually see Zach, but I think that's still a few seasons away from happening, especially because Williams look way more competitive than they have in recent seasons, so more drivers will want those seats. Moving on to Red Bull, and it would have been Liam Lawson, but he replaced Daniel Ricciardo for 5 races, and don't get me wrong, he was absolutely exceptional, but definitely can't be classed as a rookie anymore. I know I broke that rule for Fittipaldi, but Red Bull do actually have other options. There are 6 Red Bull juniors in Formula 2 this year, so once again, Red Bull have a monopoly on the young talent in Formula 2, but I don't know, none of them jump out at me as absolutely amazing, so I've picked Iwasa as the one to watch right now. He is the highest in the current Formula 2 standings in 3rd, which isn't bad considering it's his 2nd season and improves on his 5th place from last season, but I have picked him probably for reasons you're not expecting. And before you point it out, I know this is the Red Bull category, but Iwasa is also a Honda driver, similar to how Yuki Tsunoda is in a Red Bull seat at AlphaTauri right now, but also a Honda junior. So when Honda become the engine supplier for Aston Martin in 2026, it could get very interesting. Say Yuki Tsunoda ends up actually taking that 2nd seat to Max Verstappen at Red Bull, maybe Iwasa wins the 2024 or 2025 Formula 2 championship. Honda may come into Aston and have enough power to put one of their own drivers in. If Yuki Tsunoda maybe says no, Iwasa, out of nowhere, could find himself in a Formula 1 seat. However, I feel like I've said if quite a lot, so I've kept this quite low on the list because it's not overly likely to happen, but it would be very fun. When it comes to Alpine, we know they produce talent. I am incredibly grateful of how well Oscar Piastri is doing this season at McLaren, although I did find it tricky to split Jack Doohan and Victor Martins. I feel like both of them have had very interesting runs up to this point in their career, and they find themselves just 7 points apart in the Formula 2 standings. But Martins is a rookie this season in Formula 2 compared to Doohan, who is in his 2nd year. So if I have to pick one, which I do, that's kind kind of the point of this video, then the raw driving ability of Martin's does excite me that little bit more. He was actually dropped by the Renault Alpine Academy after losing the Euro Cup title to Oscar Piastri, but won the season after to get his place back in the Renault Alpine Academy. And I know Alpine are weird with their drivers, but that seems exceptionally strange. He then managed to win Formula 3 last season, which, considering 6 drivers had the chance to take the title heading into the final race, and he managed to nab the trophy, that's delivering under pressure. Even if he won under really weird circumstances, there was a red flag and multiple drivers received penalties for track limits infringements, including Martins himself, and he only won on countback for having more second places over the course of the season, but still, he won. He's been fairly impressive in his first Formula 2 season also. He's only 22, so maybe there's an outside shot at a Formula 1 seat. The Aston Martin Formula 1 driver development program is brand new for the 2023 season, and Felipe Drugovich is the sole member. So I didn't have a lot of choice, and I've gone for Felipe Drugovich. It was quite weird that the Brazilian wasn't affiliated to a Formula 1 team, but still managed to dominate the 2022 Formula 2 Championship. I know that it was his 3rd season in Formula 2, but 5 wins, 10 podiums, and winning the championship by over 100 points. That just speaks for itself, and I think Aston Martin making him their first official junior driver was a really smart pickup. He was made their test driver at the start of the 2023 season, and he's notched up some considerable mileage in Aston Martin machinery, coming in for Lance Stroll in testing at the start of the year in Bahrain. Obviously, he did pretty decent. It would have been interesting to see what he could have done in a full race at Bahrain had Lance Stroll not made it back, especially because the Aston Martin car was at its absolute peak then. That was when Fernando Alonso was just getting podium after podium after podium. And he has also been absolutely rapid in the Formula E outings that he's done with Maserati. He has topped every single rookie test that he's done as part of Formula E. But I just feel like the driver development program at Aston being so young, there's no obvious path for Felipe, and he hasn't really been linked to any seats in the near future. So it's very much a wait and see for the Brazilian. Alfa Romeo, or more specifically Sauber, have Théo Pourchaire as part of their young driver program. The Frenchman has actually been on their books since his Formula 4 days. He's worked his way all the way up and is currently Alfa Romeo's test driver for this season. He's also been confirmed to be Alfa Romeo's test driver for next season and has a good chance of walking away from the Formula 2 finale in Abu Dhabi next month as the 2023 Formula 2 champion at the 3rd time of asking. He has a 25-point lead in the championship with only 39 points left. Although he has only won 1 race this season, he's built up his points by consistently finishing in the podium places, but never really seems to win any races. Although I suppose at the end of the day, the points are the most important thing, and he'll definitely take a championship victory because in the last few seasons, he's been very unlucky. However, if he does go on to win the championship, he won't be allowed to compete in Formula 2 again next season, and Sauber have already opted to retain Zhou Guanyu and Valtteri Bottas for next year. So Théo will find himself 3rd choice and test driver for the 2024 season at Sauber. I think he'll do a lot of testing though, and come 2025, maybe if Valtteri Bottas retires or Zhou Guanyu doesn't have an exceptional season, he could definitely find himself in a Sauber seat. But the only reason I have him 4th on this list rather than higher up is the Audi factor. We have absolutely no idea if Audi already have other drivers in mind for the team. As they're set to take control in 2026, then Théo may just miss out. Mercedes have produced some top drivers in recent memory. I'm thinking George Russell and Esteban Ocon, who are both solid members of the Formula 1 grid. They've got Frederic Vesti in Formula 2, Paul Aron in Formula 3, but I'm most excited by Andrea Kimi Antonelli. He is coming off the back of winning the Formula Regional Europe Championship, where he won 13 of the last 19 races, and from there, most go into Formula 3. Kimi is skipping Formula 3 next year and driving straight into Formula 2 for the 2024 season. The last driver to make this large of a jump through single-seater categories was Max Verstappen, which has caught the eye of a lot of motor racing fans. Which as many has become a lot more famous than other drivers in lower formulas usually are, but he also seems to have the talent to back up the hype. I mean, Mercedes clearly have a lot of faith in him if they're allowing him to skip Formula 3 and jump straight into Formula 2. He also has the benefit of being an Italian driver, and there haven't been many Italians for the country to get behind recently, which is weird because they absolutely love Formula 1 racing in Italy. Although I don't know actually how Italian Ferrari fans would feel about an Italian winning and representing Mercedes. That might be quite weird. It's still very early on in his career, and I'm not expecting him to win Formula 2 next year, but he's definitely one to watch next season. Ollie Behrman and Arthur Leclerc are currently in Formula 2 representing Ferrari's academy, and of the two of them, Ollie Behrman just looks like the real deal to me. I know you can throw British bias in the comments down below, but he became part of Ferrari's academy at the end of the 2021 season, a year which saw him win the ADAC Formula 4 Championship and the Italian Formula 4 Championship. And then in 2022, he was third in Formula 3, just 7 points off Victor Martins, who I mentioned before. And had the penultimate weekend in Zandvoort gone differently, he definitely would have won that championship. But I would argue this season in Formula 2, we've seen him really step up. He has 4 wins already this season, which is joint top with Vesti amongst a fairly patchy season. And then we also got to see him drive a Haas during a free practice 1 session at Mexico, where he just absolutely stole the show. He was quickest of the 5 free practice 1 young drivers. Okay, you can feel sorry for Théo Pourchaire, but Haas's feedback of Ollie Behrman was glowingly positive. He exceeded expectations, was professional, and he didn't really put a foot wrong. His communication and feedback was really good as well, which meant that the calmness and the maturity of his drive was compared to the likes of George Russell and Charles Leclerc when they were coming through as rookies, which is a huge compliment, and surely we're going to see him on the Formula 1 grid, probably alongside those two sometime soon. It feels like McLaren have kind of cheated their way to the top of this list. Until recently, McLaren had IndyCar champion Alex Palou on their books, but even though he's now left, they still have the best driver on this list by a considerable margin. Pato O'Ward is also a current member of the IndyCar grid and has been for the last 4 years, but has never raced in Formula 1, so technically can be seen as a rookie. Although he can feel a little hard done by. He was part of the Red Bull Academy in 2019, but the FIA awarded fewer super license points for his Indy Lights Championship win, so he didn't have enough points to race in Formula 1 in 2020, where he definitely could have been at least in the mix for a Red Bull seat. I mean, Red Bull, Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri, there's been a lot of driver changes within that over the last few seasons, but instead he was not retained by Red Bull so that he could move over to IndyCar with McLaren. So whereas the rest of this list was up-and-coming stars, Pato is a staple member of the IndyCar grid, and considering he's only 24, has achieved some great results whilst over in the States. He has 4 race victories, a second place in the 2022 Indy 500. He finished as high as 3rd in the Drivers' Championship. So with that kind of resume, he couldn't go anywhere but top of my rankings. However, I also don't think we'll see him in Formula 1 anytime soon. As much as I think he'd be great for any Formula 1 team, the Mexican seems pretty settled in IndyCar and never gets realistically linked to any Formula 1 openings, but I do like seeing him come in for the occasional McLaren test every now and then. But what do you think? Which drivers are you most excited about seeing in Formula 1 in the future? Let me know in the comments down below, and if you've enjoyed this video, I also put together this video here which I think you'll absolutely love. So click that link and I'll see you over there.